The gunshot echoed across the dusty plains of Texas, sending a flock of startled birds into the sky as Zadie Granger crouched behind the overturned wagon, her heart hammering against her ribs. It was 1875, and the stretch of land between Dallas and Fort Worth had never felt so endless or dangerous. The setting sun painted the horizon a violent red, matching the blood seeping through the fabric of the stranger's shirt just yards away from her hiding spot. "You still breathin' over there," Zadie called out, her voice steady despite the fear churning in her stomach. She'd been on her way back to her small ranch when she'd spotted the ambush, 3 men surrounding a lone rider, their intentions clear as day. A groan answered her question. "Lady, you need to get out of here," the man called back, his voice strained with pain. "This ain't your fight." Zadie peered around the edge of the wagon. The 3 attackers had scattered when she'd fired her warning shot, but she knew they wouldn't stay gone for long. The wounded stranger was slumped against a boulder, one hand pressed to his side, the other still gripping his revolver. "I'm not in the habit of leaving wounded men to die," she replied, gathering her courage before making a dash toward him. Up close, she could see he was younger than she'd first thought, perhaps 25, not much older than her 23 years. His face was handsome despite being streaked with dirt and grimacing in pain. Dark hair fell across his forehead, and his eyes, though clouded with agony, were a startling blue. "You shouldn't have helped," the cowboy said through gritted teeth as she knelt beside him. "These men don't take kindly to interference." Zadie tore a strip from her petticoat, pressing it firmly against his wound. "Tell me that when you're standing," she shot back, meeting his gaze with defiance. A hint of a smile touched his lips. "Quinn Calloway," he managed, wincing as she applied pressure to the bullet wound. "Though I doubt we'll have time for proper introductions once Harmon's boys circle back." "Zadie Granger," she replied, helping him to his feet. "My wagon is just over that ridge. Think you can make it?" Quinn nodded, leaning heavily against her as they staggered toward her wagon. "Why would you risk your life for a stranger, Miss Granger? My father taught me that courage isn't about having no fear," she said, helping him into the back of her wagon. "It's about doing what's right despite it." As the sound of approaching horses reached them, Zadie snapped the reins, urging her team forward. The wagon lurched into motion just as bullets began to pepper the ground behind them. "They're gaining," Quinn called out, firing his revolver with his good arm. Zadie pushed her horses harder, steering them toward a narrow pass between 2 rocky outcrops. "Hold on," she shouted, guiding the wagon into the treacherous terrain where the pursuers' horses would struggle to follow. The gamble paid off. By the time they emerged from the pass, their attackers had fallen behind, unwilling to risk their mounts on the dangerous path. As the danger receded, Zadie could focus on reaching her ranch before nightfall and before Quinn lost any more blood. "Who are those men?" she asked, glancing back at Quinn, who had slumped against the side of the wagon. "Harmon's hired guns," he replied weakly. "I've been tracking a shipment they stole. Didn't expect them to get the drop on me." "You a lawman?" Quinn's laugh turned into a cough. "No, madam." "Just a man with a score to settle," Zadie frowned. "So I just risked my life for a revenge mission." "Not exactly," Quinn said, his voice growing fainter. "Those men robbed a stagecoach last month, killed the driver and a passenger. The passenger was my brother." Zadie's expression softened. "I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry yet," Quinn murmured. "You're now involved in something dangerous, and I never wanted that for anyone else." As the wagon crested a hill, Zadie's modest ranch came into view, a small house with a barn and corral nestled against a grove of cottonwood trees. It wasn't much, but it was hers, purchased with the money her father had left her after his death 3 years ago. "We're here," she said, bringing the wagon to a stop near the house. "Let's get you inside." Helping Quinn into her home, Zadie settled him on her bed before gathering supplies to tend his wound. The bullet had gone through his side without hitting anything vital, but the blood loss and risk of infection were still serious concerns. "You've done this before," Quinn observed as she cleaned the wound with practiced hands. "My father was a doctor," she explained, threading a needle. "I helped him with his patients until he died. This might hurt." Quinn barely flinched as she stitched the wound closed. His eyes never left her face, studying her with an intensity that made her cheeks warm despite the gravity of the situation. "You live out here alone?" he asked as she bandaged his torso. Zadie nodded. "Just me and a handful of cattle. I sell them in Dallas when I need money." "It's not safe for a woman alone," Quinn said, concern evident in his voice. Zadie's eyes flashed. "I've managed just fine for 3 years, Mr. Calloway. I don't need a man to protect me." A smile tugged at his lips. "I can see that. Still, Harmon's men won't give up easily, especially now that you've helped me. They'll track us here." "Then we'll be ready for them," Zadie said firmly. "But first, you need rest." As night fell, Zadie kept watch from her porch, rifle across her lap. The vast Texas sky stretched above her, stars glittering like scattered diamonds. Despite the danger, there was a strange sense of purpose in her that had been missing for too long. Living alone, running the small ranch, she'd been existing rather than living since her father's death. Inside, Quinn slept fitfully, his fever breaking just before dawn. When Zadie checked on him, his eyes were clear and alert. "Thank you," he said, catching her hand as she adjusted his bandage. "I would have died out there without you." "You're not out of danger yet," she reminded him, ignoring the warmth of his touch. "How are you feeling?" "Like I've been shot," he replied with a wry smile. "But I'll live, thanks to you." Over the next few days, as Quinn regained his strength, Zadie learned more about him. He had been a rancher near Austin until his brother's death. The stolen shipment contained not just money, but a deed to a silver mine in Colorado that rightfully belonged to his family. "So it's not just revenge," Zadie said as they sat on her porch one evening. "It's your livelihood." Quinn nodded, watching the sunset. "That deed is the only thing that could save my family's ranch. Without it, everything my father built will be lost. And these men, Harmon's men, they're taking the deed to Dallas to sell it to the highest bidder," Quinn confirmed. "I tracked them this far before they ambushed me." Zadie was quiet for a moment. "Then we need to intercept them before they reach Dallas." Quinn turned to her, surprise evident on his face. You're in no condition to face them alone," she pointed out. "And they've made this my fight too by coming after me." "It's too dangerous, Zadie," she raised an eyebrow. "Tell me that when you're standing without wincing, Cowboy." The next morning, as Zadie was feeding her horses, she spotted a cloud of dust on the horizon. "Quinn." She called, rushing back to the house. "Riders coming." Quinn was already up, buckling on his gun belt despite the pain evident in his movements. "How many?" "At least 4, she said, grabbing her rifle. "More than we can handle in a direct fight." Quinn's expression hardened. "You need to go, Zadie. Take the back trail through the ravine. I'll hold them off." "I'm not leaving you," she insisted. "This is my home. And I won't have your death on my conscience," he argued. "Please, Zadie, go to the sheriff in Dallas. Tell him what's happening." The determination in his eyes told her arguing would be futile. "Fine," she relented. "But promise me you won't try to be a hero. Just delay them, then follow me." Quinn's hand cupped her cheek, the gesture so unexpected it stole her breath. "I promise." Heart pounding, Zadie gathered essential supplies and mounted her fastest horse. As she rode away from the only home she'd known since her father's death, she glanced back to see Quinn positioning himself on the porch, rifle ready. The sound of gunfire followed her as she crested the first hill, and it took all her willpower not to turn back. The journey to Dallas was tense, every shadow potentially hiding Harmon's men. By the time she reached the town, it was late afternoon. The sheriff's office was a small building on the main street, flanked by a saloon and a general store. Sheriff Thomas Mercer was a grizzled man with a skeptical nature, but he listened to Zadie's story with growing concern. "Harmon's gang has been causing trouble across 3 counties," he said when she finished, "but going after them means leaving Dallas unprotected." "They killed Quinn's brother," Zadie pressed, "robbed a stagecoach, and now they're bringing stolen property here to sell." The sheriff sighed. "I can send a telegram to Fort Worth for reinforcements, but it'll take time. Meanwhile, I suggest you stay at the hotel. It's not safe for you to be out with Harmon's men looking for you." Zadie had no intention of hiding in a hotel room while Quinn faced danger alone, but she nodded her agreement. As soon as the sheriff left to send his telegram, she slipped away, heading to the livery stable to prepare her horse for the return journey. "Going somewhere, miss?" Zadie whirled around to find a tall man blocking the stable entrance. His hand rested casually on his holstered gun. "Just checking on my horse," she said, trying to sound calm. The man smiled, but it didn't reach his cold eyes. "You're the woman who helped Calloway, aren't you? Harmon wants to meet you." Before Zadie could reach for her hidden derringer, two more men appeared behind her. She was trapped. They took her to a two-story building on the outskirts of Dallas, a former trading post converted into a makeshift headquarters. Inside, sitting behind a desk littered with maps and papers, was a man she assumed to be Harmon. He was older than she expected, perhaps in his 50s, with silver threading through his dark beard. His eyes assessed her with calculating interest. "Miss Granger," he said, gesturing to a chair. "Please sit." "I prefer to stand," Zadie replied coldly. Harmon shrugged. "As you wish." "I understand you've been harboring a man who's been causing me considerable inconvenience. Quinn Calloway is pursuing justice for his murdered brother," she said. "Hardly what I'd call an inconvenience. His brother was unfortunate collateral damage," Harmon said dismissively. "Business can be messy." "Is that what you call murder? Business?" Harmon's eyes hardened. "I call it progress, Miss Granger. This land is changing. Those who can't adapt will be left behind." "What do you want with me?" Zadie demanded. "Leverage," Harmon replied simply. "Calloway has proven remarkably persistent. I believe having you as my guest will ensure his cooperation." "He barely knows me," Zadie said, trying to downplay their connection. "We met days ago." Harmon smiled knowingly. "Yet he was willing to stay behind and face my men to give you time to escape. That suggests a certain attachment." Zadie's heart sank. If Harmon knew that, it meant his men had encountered Quinn. "Is he alive?" she asked, unable to keep the fear from her voice. "For now," Harmon confirmed. "My men are bringing him to Dallas as we speak. He'll be more amenable to reason with you in my care." Hours passed with Zadie confined to a small room on the upper floor of Harmon's hideout. Through the window, she could see the main street of Dallas in the distance, taunting her with its proximity yet impossibility of escape. When the door finally opened, she was expecting Harmon or one of his men. Instead, Quinn stood in the doorway, flanked by guards. His face was bruised and he moved stiffly, but the relief in his eyes when he saw her was palpable. "Are you hurt?" he asked immediately. "I'm fine," she assured him. "You look terrible." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "You should see the other fellows." One of the guards shoved Quinn into the room. "Harmon says you have until morning to decide, Calloway. Sign over your claim to the mine or the lady gets a one-way trip to the border." The door slammed shut, leaving them alone. "I'm sorry, Zadie," Quinn said once they were alone. "This is exactly what I was trying to prevent." "Don't apologize," she said firmly. "I made my choices. What happened after I left the ranch," Quinn sighed, sinking onto the room's single chair. "They came in force. I managed to wound two before they overwhelmed me. They were taking me to Harmon when they got word you'd been captured in Dallas. Seemed to improve their mood considerably. And now Harmon wants you to give up your family's claim to save me," Zadie concluded, pacing the small room. "You can't do it, Quinn." "I don't see that I have much choice," he said quietly. "I won't let him hurt you." Zadie stopped pacing. "There's always a choice, and I didn't save your life just so you could throw away everything you've been fighting for." Quinn stood, crossing to her in 2 strides. His hands grasped her shoulders gently. "Some things are worth more than silver mines, Zadie." The intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. "We've only known each other days," she whispered. "Sometimes days are enough to know what matters," he replied, his voice husky. Before she could respond, he pulled her into a kiss that stole the very thoughts from her head. His lips were warm and insistent against hers, conveying everything words couldn't. When they finally broke apart, Zadie felt as though the world had shifted on its axis. "Now," Quinn said, his voice steadier than his hands as they cupped her face. "Let's figure out how to get out of here." Zadie glanced around the room, assessing their options. "The window's too small and there are guards at the door." "They searched me thoroughly, but they might have missed something," Quinn said, checking his pockets. His face brightened as he pulled out a small blade from his boot. "They didn't find my lucky knife." "Lucky indeed," Zadie said, taking it from him. "But what can we do with something so small?" Quinn nodded toward the window. "See those barrels across the street? They're from the distillery, highly flammable," Zadie caught on quickly. "A distraction." "More than that," Quinn said grimly. "If we can create enough chaos, it might draw attention from the sheriff's office." Working together, they tore strips from the bedsheets, creating a makeshift rope. Using Quinn's knife, they worked it around the window frame, eventually managing to force it open wider than it was designed to go. "I can hit that barrel from here," Quinn said, taking careful aim with the knife. "The moment it catches, the guards will be distracted. That's when we make our move." The knife flew true, striking a barrel with enough force to create a spark against the metal rim. The alcohol inside ignited instantly, sending flames shooting upward. Shouts of alarm rang out as guards rushed to deal with the spreading fire. Quinn and Zadie seized their opportunity, forcing the door and overpowering the single remaining guard. They raced down the stairs and out the back door of the building, emerging into the growing chaos. "The sheriff's office!" Zadie shouted over the commotion, pointing down the street. They ran, dodging panicked townspeople and the bucket brigade forming to combat the blaze. Just as they neared the safety of the sheriff's office, a shot rang out. Quinn stumbled, clutching his arm. "Keep going." He urged Zadie, but she refused to leave him, supporting his weight as they staggered the final yards to the sheriff's door. Sheriff Mercer was already organizing men to fight the fire when they burst in. "Miss Granger," he exclaimed in surprise. "What in tarnation, Harmon's gang?" Zadie gasped. "They're the ones who started the fire. They've been holding us prisoner." As if to confirm her words, several of Harmon's men appeared outside, guns drawn. The sheriff's deputies moved to confront them, and gunfire erupted in the street. "Get down," Sheriff Mercer ordered, pushing Zadie and Quinn behind his desk as bullets shattered the office window. The gunfight was brief but fierce. When it ended, 2 of Harmon's men lay dead in the street, and the sheriff's deputy had captured a third, but Harmon himself was nowhere to be seen. "He'll have the deed with him," Quinn said grimly, his wounded arm now bandaged by the town doctor. "Without it, everything's been for nothing." Sheriff Mercer adjusted his hat. "Not necessarily. We've got one of his men alive, and he might be persuaded to talk. Plus, the reinforcements from Fort Worth should be here by morning." Zadie, who had been staring thoughtfully out the window, suddenly straightened. "I think I know where he might go. The stagecoach office." Quinn looked at her quizzically. "If he's trying to escape with the deed, he'll want the fastest way out of Texas," she explained. "The evening stage to Shreveport leaves in an hour." "She's right," the sheriff said, checking his pocket watch, "and that gives us just enough time to set a trap." The stagecoach office was busy with the usual evening departures when Zadie entered, looking every bit the travel-weary young woman. She approached the ticket counter, keeping a careful eye on the other passengers waiting on the benches. "1 ticket to Shreveport, please," she requested, counting out coins from her purse. As she completed her transaction, the door opened behind her. The reflection in the window showed Harmon, carrying a small valise and looking nervously over his shoulder. Zadie moved to a bench, pretending to arrange her shawl while watching Harmon purchase his ticket. When he sat on a bench near the door, she casually moved closer. "Leaving town in a hurry?" she asked softly. Harmon's head snapped up, his hand moving to his concealed weapon. "Miss Granger, you're proving remarkably difficult to be rid of." "I could say the same about you," she replied. "The sheriff is searching for you, you know. Your men have either been captured or killed. Yet here I am, about to board a stagecoach to a new life," Harmon said with a thin smile. "With a document that will make me a very wealthy man." "You mean the deed you stole from Quinn's family, the one you murdered his brother to get?" Harmon's eyes narrowed. "Careful, Miss Granger. There are too many witnesses here for me to silence you permanently, but accidents can happen on long journeys." "Is that a threat?" she asked, raising her voice slightly. Several heads turned in their direction. "A promise," Harmon growled, standing. "Now if you'll excuse me, I believe they're calling my stage." As Harmon moved toward the door, Zadie nodded almost imperceptibly. Quinn stepped through the doorway, blocking Harmon's exit with Sheriff Mercer and 2 deputies behind him, going somewhere. Quinn asked, his revolver pointed steadily at Harmon's chest, Harmon's face contorted with fury. He reached for his gun, but Zadie was faster, knocking his arm aside. The sheriff's men moved in swiftly, disarming and restraining him before he could recover. "Nolan Harmon, you're under arrest for murder, theft, kidnapping, and attempted murder," Sheriff Mercer announced, taking the valise from Harmon's grasp. Inside, as expected, was the deed to the silver mine, along with a substantial amount of cash. As Harmon was led away, cursing and threatening, Quinn turned to Zadie. "That was a dangerous plan. He could have shot you. But he didn't," she pointed out, "and now you have your family's deed back." Quinn took her hands in his expression serious. "I meant what I said earlier, Zadie. Some things are worth more than silver mines." "Like what?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "Like a woman brave enough to save a stranger's life, smart enough to outsmart a gang of outlaws, and stubborn enough not to run when things got dangerous." Zadie smiled. "I believe the word you're looking for is determined." "Determined," Quinn agreed with a laugh. "Among other things." 3 months later, with Harmon awaiting trial and his gang disbanded, Quinn stood on the porch of Zadie's ranch house, though it was now their ranch house. The silver mine had yielded enough profit to expand the property, build a new barn, and increase their herd substantially. But the real treasure, as Quinn frequently reminded Zadie, was the life they were building together. The wedding had been small, attended by Sheriff Mercer, Quinn's parents, and a few neighbors from surrounding ranches. Quinn's wounded arm had healed completely, though the scar remained as a reminder of how they'd met, thinking deep thoughts. Zadie asked, joining him on the porch with 2 cups of coffee. "Just remembering the first thing you ever said to me," Quinn replied, taking one of the cups. "Tell me that when you're standing," Zadie laughed. "You were being stubborn." "I was trying to protect you," he corrected with a smile. "Not that you needed it. Everyone needs help sometimes," she said, leaning against his shoulder as they watched the sunset paint the Texas sky in brilliant oranges and reds. "Even stubborn cowboys who think they can face down gangs of outlaws single-handedly." Quinn pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "I'm just grateful my stubborn streak didn't cost me the best thing that ever happened to me." "And what's that?" she teased. "You know very well," he said, setting down his coffee to pull her into his arms. "The brave, beautiful woman who saved my life and then stole my heart." As their lips met, with the vast Texas landscape spread before them and the promise of their future together as boundless as the sky above, Zadie knew that helping a wounded stranger on that fateful day had been the best decision she'd ever made. The following spring brought new life to their ranch. Calves frolicked in the pastures, crops thrived in the fields Zadie had planted, and their home rang with laughter as friends and family gathered to celebrate the news that a baby would join their family by winter. Quinn found Zadie in the garden one evening, her hands dirty from planting herbs, a peaceful smile on her face as she rested a hand on her growing belly. "Still glad you stopped to help that wounded cowboy?" he asked, kneeling beside her. Zadie leaned forward to kiss him, leaving a smudge of dirt on his cheek. "Every single day," she replied, "especially now that he's standing tall enough to build us a fine life." And as the Texas sun set on another day of their shared adventure, both knew that the greatest journey of all had begun that day on the dusty road from Dallas, with a gunshot, an act of courage, and 2 hearts finding each other against all odds.